Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, let's start with the latest on the presidential race. Former President Donald Trump has yet to commit to a debate with Vice President Kamala Harris now that she's the Democrats' presumptive nominee. But in an interview last night with Fox News host Laura Ingraham, Trump said he will probably end up debating Harris eventually.
I want to do a debate, but I also can say this. Everybody knows who I am, and now people know who she is. She's a radical left lunatic. She'll destroy our country. She wants open borders.
Then why not debate her?
Well, wait. But because they already know everything.
Former President Trump says if he does debate Harris, he would like to do it before early votes are cast. Harris has accused Trump of backpedaling on a debate set for September 10th on ABC News. In the Fox interview, Trump called ABC a, quote, terrible outfit. He complained about the network getting rich off the debate.
Meanwhile, Nathan, Vice President Harris is honing in on her search for a running mate, and now she has one less candidate to consider. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper is pulling his name from consideration. In a post on X, he says it's not the right time for him or his state to be on a national ticket, and Cooper was campaigning for Harris last night.
If white males would vote 1% to 2% more for Democrats than they usually do, then we win this race.
Governor Roy Cooper took part in a Zoom call dubbed White Dudes for Harris. Today, Harris will be back out on the campaign trail with a rally in Atlanta. The vice president is looking to expand the electoral map into the Sunbelt states of Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, along with the Democrats' traditional blue wall of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Well, as for President Biden, Karen, he's no longer on the campaign trail, but he is making a play for major Supreme Court reform in an appearance at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Library in Austin, Texas. We get that story from Bloomberg's Ed Baxter.
President Biden is calling for lawmakers to pass new binding ethic rules and term limits for the justices.
This nation was founded on the principle there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law.
But Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says it is not necessary.
President Biden and his leftist allies don't like the current composition of the court, so they want to shred the Constitution to change it.
McConnell says there are already ethics rules in place. Biden contends the current court has undermined long-established civil rights principles and protections. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thank you. Now to the latest developments in the presidential election in Venezuela. The country's opposition says it can prove electoral fraud as thousands took to the streets of the capital, Caracas, to protest what they say is President Nicolas Maduro's fraudulent win. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, speaking through an interpreter, says her candidate won more than double Maduro's votes.
Un milagro. Es un milagro.
Today, I want to tell all Venezuelans in the country and abroad, to all the Democrats of the world, we now have proof of the truth of what happened yesterday in Venezuela.
The administration has accused Machado of being involved in a plot to alter the voting results. International pressure has been ramping up on Maduro to provide transparency over the election tally.
Back to the U.S. now, Karen, with a focus on the economy. The Fed begins its two-day meeting on interest rates today. No change in monetary policy is expected tomorrow, but policymakers are expected to set the stage for a rate cut in September. Amanda Lynham, head of macro credit research at BlackRock, talked about the Fed on Bloomberg Surveillance.
The way it stands right now is we don't see a lot of urgency for large or swift rate cuts. So the base case that we have is 25 basis points every other meeting. So that means maybe 2 cuts this year and then a handful of cuts next year. Say we land at a terminal rate closer to 4%, definitely less restrictive where we are now, but nowhere near the zero lower bound of the post-financial crisis era.
BlackRock's Amanda Lynham says swaps markets are fully pricing a September move.
Well, Nathan, the yen is weakening against the dollar as the Bank of Japan also kicks off a 2-day policy meeting. Overnight index swaps priced in a 34% chance of an interest rate increase of 15 basis points.
In Europe, Karen, the euro area economy grew more than expected in the second quarter as resilient expansion in key countries allowed the region to shrug off Germany's surprise contraction. Gross domestic product rose 0.3% as both France and Spain beat estimates, and Italy kept growing as well. That offset a 0.1% drop in Germany.
Nathan, earnings also in focus. Shares of Diageo down 8.5% in Europe. A slowdown in Latin America, the Caribbean, and the U.S. pushed the maker of Johnnie Walker whiskey to its first annual sales decline since the pandemic.
Shares of BP, meanwhile, are up about 1.5%. The British oil giant posted profit above analyst estimates. Strong second quarter earnings from pumping crude offset weakness in other parts of the business. BP also maintained the pace of share buybacks and increased its dividend.
Well, here in the U.S., Nathan, big tech earnings are in focus as Microsoft reports after the closing bell, and Bloomberg's Tom Busby has more on what to expect.
The big focus for investors, whether Microsoft can continue to post strong growth in its cloud unit led by its Azure cloud infrastructure business. Also key, whether the billions of dollars it spent on its generative AI chatbot, Microsoft Copilot, will start to pay off. Consensus calls for revenue of $64.52 billion, adjusted earnings per share of $2.94. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Tom, thank you. And ahead of those earnings, Microsoft is calling on Congress to crack down on so-called deep fakes. The company is urging lawmakers to pass a comprehensive law aimed at images and sound made with artificial intelligence to prevent election interference and malicious targeting of individuals. Microsoft is calling for labels on AI-generated content, as well as federal and state laws that penalize creation and distribution of sexually exploitative deepfakes.
Nathan, Warren Buffett is unloading more shares of Bank of America. Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway disclosed its third disposal this month of BofA shares, pairing its massive profitable bet on the lender by more than $3 billion. Even with the reduction, Berkshire still holds almost 962 million shares worth $39.5 billion.
And Karen, famed short seller Andrew Left has pleaded not guilty to federal fraud charges. This sets the stage for a high-profile legal battle over his strategy. Prosecutors accuse the Citron Research founder of manipulating the market to benefit his trading and making false statements to investigators. If convicted, Left faces decades behind bars. His trial is set for late September.
And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. There are fears over a broader regional war in the Middle East after Israel promised retaliation for a missile strike that killed 12 children on a soccer field in the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights over the weekend. Hezbollah has denied being behind the attack. Some people in the community where it struck have openly questioned the claim that the civilian area was intentionally targeted. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, visiting the site of the attack, says this cannot be ignored. An Illinois sheriff says his department, quote, failed Sonia Massey. She was the black woman shot to death by a white deputy in her home after she called 911 about possible intruders. Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell spoke at a community meeting in response to outrage over the shooting at protests nationwide.
I'm sorry. She called for help and we failed her. That's all she did. That's all she did was call for help.
The now fired deputy Sean Grayson is charged with homicide. A horrible knife attack in Britain. Police say the stabbings at a children's dance class in northwest England yesterday killed 2 children and injured 9 others. The event was a Taylor Swift-themed dance and yoga event for children aged about 6 to 11 years old. It took place at a community center in Southport near Liverpool. Chief Constable Serena Kennedy.
When they arrived, they were shocked to find that multiple people, many of whom were children, had been subjected to a ferocious attack.
Chief Kennedy says officials have arrested a 17-year-old boy in the incident. Today, New York's highest court will hear the latest GOP challenge to the state's Mail-in Voting Act. They argue the Democrats violated the state constitution when they passed the early voting law last year. But New York State political expert Michael Krasner says that's not what this is really all about.
What's really on their mind is winning and losing elections. And in general, the easier it is for people to vote, the better Democrats do, and the more likely Republicans are to lose.
Krasner says what the legislation is doing is protecting and extending a basic right. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Easy victories for the Mets and Yankees. The only drama was in seeing which New York team would score the most runs. It was the Mets. They walloped the Twins at Citi Field 15-2, scored all their runs in 3 innings. 6 in the 4th, 5 in the 6th. 4 more in the 8th. Mets had 17 hits, only 1 homer. That from Pete Alonso. The Yankees hit 6 home runs in Philadelphia, and sure enough, a pair from the captain.
Marte's pitch is swung on. Oh, hit in the air to deep left. There it goes, way back. Oh, adios, amigo. Oh, what a shot. Aaron Judge, his second bomb of the night.
WFAN had it. So Judge now 39 homers on the season, and welcome to the Yankees. Jazz Chisholm, his second game with his new team. He homered twice. Ben Rice and Anthony Volpe also left the yard. Yanks all over the Major League, leading Phillies 14-4. Yanks have scored 40 runs in their last 4 games. They're only half game behind Baltimore, who split a doubleheader with Toronto. Last place Blue Jays waving the white flag on their season. Traded Justin Turner to Seattle. Pitcher Yusei Kikuchi to Houston. Outfielder Lane Thomas going from Washington to Cleveland. Cincinnati traded Frankie Montas to Milwaukee. The Giants dealt Jorge Soler to Atlanta. The trade deadline, 6 o'clock today. At the Olympics, U.S. won a couple of silver medals, 5 bronze. They still have only 3 gold medals. That could change today in the women's gymnastics final. Simone Biles will be in all 4 events. In the pool yesterday, 15 medals won by swimmers from 10 different nations, and 3 golds were won by swimmers under the age of 21. 17-year-old Canadian phenom Summer McIntosh won the 400 IM. She's expected to win a couple more golds. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager, watching political developments on a couple of fronts this morning. In Venezuela, the opposition says it can prove candidate Edmundo Gonzalez defeated President Nicolas Maduro on Sunday in a landslide, while here in the U.S., former President Donald Trump's going back and forth on whether he wants to debate his new opponent in the 2024 race, Vice President Kamala Harris. For the latest on all the politics, we're joined now by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. What is the latest in this disputed election result in Venezuela? Maduro, the president, has been declared the winner, but the opposition apparently says it's got a pretty significant tally of its own.
Right. We saw thousands of people taking to the streets, not just in Caracas, but in some other parts of the country, and within Caracas in neighborhoods that have in the past been more pro-Maduro. So it's a very tense situation. The opposition says that it has seen detailed voter data that shows they had an irreversible win with more than double the vote count for their candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, than what Maduro got. So we have to see what happens as morning unfolds there in South America. The opposition has called for what they're calling citizen assemblies to begin taking place around 11:30 a.m. In other news related to that, President Biden is expected to have a call with Brazil's president today as well to discuss the situation. And Venezuela's government, meanwhile, has accused the opposition of trying to rig the election. And we haven't seen arrest warrants go out for the opposition leaders, but that's something that their supporters, opposition supporters, are watching out for.
Apart from those next steps, including that conversation between the president and Brazil's leader, who's been a traditional ally, I believe, of Maduro, unless I'm mistaken, I guess the ball is in now Maduro's court to show that the election results as certified by the Electoral Center are indeed valid?
Yeah, the Maduro government, and going back before him, his predecessor Hugo Chavez. I mean, all the major elections that they had were tainted by accusations of fraud. But it definitely feels different this time. The opposition was pretty buoyant heading into the Sunday vote. There is widespread doubt. Even some of Maduro's more traditional allies, you mentioned Brazil, but also the government in Mexico, government in Colombia, a little more left-leaning governments. They have so far not really, stepped up to congratulate Maduro. They say they want to see more transparency about how these votes played out and what the breakdown was.
Meanwhile, we've got a whole new race here in the U.S. With former President Trump now facing Vice President Harris, and kind of going back and forth on whether he's going to commit to a debate with Harris or even agree to a debate.
He certainly seems to be trying to keep his options open. He says, yes, I'll debate, but, I may not. The official line has been that the Republicans are waiting for the Democrats to officially make Kamala Harris their nominee. That should happen by, I think, August 7th is the date for that. But yeah, there's some hemming and hawing about whether it'll take place. Maybe there'll be adjustments to the date, the September 10th date. Trump has also said he'd like to see it hosted by a different network than ABC. So those are some of the tweaks, but I think certainly, I think both sides right now seem to be expecting a debate, but whether it happens on the terms previously agreed remains to be seen.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.